M can pick up all of those things by, non-consensual intimate images and spiking are all versions of coercive control within a domestic abuse relationship. So M will point that out. So instead of officers just looking at it very simply as this is one crime, they're looking at it as pattern of behaviour, and M can identify that pattern of behaviour and say, have you considered this might be coercive control? If you do, you might want to look at these things. You might want to look at the risk assessments we need to do to make sure we can keep these people safe. So it enables us to do all of those things without someone having to ask it, is this domestic abuse? It will answer in the first for it. Now, when we talk about deepfake images, these used to be images that were cut out and stuck on top of something from a catalogue, and now we're seeing them created at the touch of a button and real humans being developed into the spaces that they have never ever been, and we're trying to detect that. So it's changing the way police work because we're being forced into dealing with crimes around that, detecting AI, crimes across the board. Fraud is being picked up more around AI. So I think AI in policing is taking us in a different route, but what we can do with it and how we can utilize it within the police is also quite superb. What we still see is these are crimes that not every officer will have come across. They're not ones every officer was trained on 20 years ago because they didn't exist. So now being able to put them through this toolkit in their hands and being able to give them this is the national approach we take. So we've partnered with Revenge Porn Helpline so that AI generated images we can record, we can look at seeing how they're being used across the country, but actually always with the victim focus in mind. So the toolkit is enabling us to do that and provide that to every force in the country. AI is moving at such a speed, but that means criminals are using AI at such a speed as well, and they're learning a lot quicker than we are. So we're having to adapt our working processes around AI, but more importantly, the crimes that we're seeing are now AI enabled.
Welcome to the AI Adoption Podcast. I'm your host, Professor Ashley Braganza, and it delights me to welcome Claire Hammond from the NCVPP to this episode. Claire, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and the NCVPP as well, please.
Hi, so I'm Claire Hammond. I am the Temporary Detective Chief Superintendent for the National Centre of Violence Against Women and Girls and Public Protection. I'm very grateful to be here today, so thanks for having me.
Claire, tell me, what does the NCVPP do in just generally for the audience that may not be familiar with your particular organisation, please?
So the National Centre was brought about 18 months ago, and that brought together a combination of what was already 4 programmes of work across policing to create one bigger centre for almost a national centre of excellence around VOG and public protection, with the view that the programme was enabled us to go out to policing with one voice around what were the national standards and kind of guidance and how we expect work to take place around VOG and public protection, but also to provide training, the kind of latest up-to-date information, and also look at tackling some of those national issues around VOG and public protection that all police forces are struggling with. So we came together and that's what we do. So we work very closely with all forces across the country to look at bringing together, say, that guidance the best possible way we can for public protection and VOG.
And what's the relationship with the College of Policing?
So we're hosted partly by the College of Policing and partly by the National Police Chiefs Council. So we have a foot in both doors, which is great because we are working really closely with the College of Policing around training. So they are still the national centre for training and we do all of our training through them, but we also work with them around guidance and the best way to do things. So we're more or less on the formal kind of side and we do more of the kind of everyday, this is what's happening right now, and we contribute to all of those national issues. And the same from the NPCC. So the NPCC is obviously the Chiefs Council. That brings us together with all of the chiefs across the country, and we're able to look at what's causing people an issue as well as what's on the training side.
Great. Thank you for setting that context for this conversation, Claire. What's the National Centre doing in AI?
So with AI, like many things, we're almost being forced into a world of AI because it's everywhere around us. And so one of the biggest things that we've done, and we've just about to launch or have certainly launched across 43 forces in the last couple of weeks, is the new digital interface. So it's a toolkit for officers, But what's embedded in that is agent force. So it's AI agent force within the center of that digital toolkit, which enables officers to be able to get answers very quickly on issues around VOG and public protection. So we started quite small. So we're looking at non-consensual intimate images, we're looking at online harms, and we're also looking at spiking. And all of those topics, the idea is that officers can type a question, and instead of having to read an entire document to get an answer, it will look, the agent force AI looks across it, but because it's closed AI, it will only ever tell it what the officers, what the national centre wants them to know, as opposed to learning or hallucinating. So it's one of the things with AI within policing, we need to be really careful about what it's actually pushing out there. We don't want it to replace humans and decision makers, but actually this is a quick way, and it's a really efficient way to use AI to help officers on the front line, but also to help our strategic leaders when we need to tell them something or they need to understand how to put plans in place. Actually, we're able to put this all in one place for everybody now. So our agent is called M. So M sits within the center of the toolkit, and M can answer any of the questions that officers want. So we're hoping to expand that over the next 12 months. It is on everybody's front page now in policing. So like I say, we were across all 43 forces. So it's the first time we've done that with AI in terms of what they can see. So we're hoping that goes really well. But that's kind of our first step into how the centre are using it. But obviously there's lots going on around us. We're involved with police AI heavily around how we can look at using AI within things like case file, and how we can take some of the stress and the administrative burden off policing, so that they can actually police officers can be humans and do their job, whilst AI is doing some of the things that we know AI can do so well.
Out of interest, why is it called M?
So M came about, we were looking for, within Vogue, it's always about looking at the audience. So for me, M, if you think about James Bond and M, who is really the strong woman at the centre of James Bond and everything that works for that, we thought M was quite a good way to do that. Now, Emily is the lady as well within Salesforce who developed the agent force as M. So it became quite a really good point to have M as our centre point. So this strong, independent woman who can run the world. So that's what we've got within the toolkit.
Okay. I'm always interested as to where projects and get their name from, and pieces of software get their name from. Thank you.
The name is the hardest part always, isn't it? The name takes longer to develop than actual the stuff inside of it. So
very often that is so true.
Yeah.
How is AI now changing the way police work is being done?
Hugely. I mean, policing is the same as the rest of the world. We're having to catch up. Policing is a little behind with AI, probably like most of us. AI is moving at such a speed, but that means criminals are using AI at such a speed as well, and they're learning a lot quicker than we are. So we're having to adapt our working processes around AI, but more importantly, the crimes that we're seeing are now AI enabled. So some of them are AI crimes that are happening, which is something that obviously policing hasn't had to think about before. But now when we talk about deepfake images, these used to be images that were cut out and stuck on top of something from a catalogue, and now we're seeing them created at the touch of a button, and real humans being developed into the spaces that they have never ever been, and we're trying to detect that. So it's changing the way police work, because we're being forced into dealing with crimes around that, detecting AI, crimes across the board. Fraud is being picked up more around AI. So I think AI in policing is taking us in a different route, but what we can do with it and how we can utilize it within the police is also quite superb. If you think about what you can actually do, it's just putting your mind to it and looking at where it can do it and where it can do it safely, and not only efficiently, but we can have confidence in the skills that it's brought to us, rather than thinking actually we're not quite confident around AI. We see a lot in the media, don't we, around the police and the use of AI. So what we're really keen to do is, even though these crimes are coming out there which are AI enabled, is about us looking how we detect them, but still having the confidence that the police are behind it and it's not a robot.
Can you give us a couple of examples?
So in policing, we're looking at case file at the moment. So very much around, there's certain things we have to add to files that need to be there all the time. So putting things like that onto them. And we're looking at how do we summarize handovers. So when we're handing over a crime overnight to maybe a different team the next day, how we're making sure that that team gets the best briefing without the 2-line email that sometimes you've seen in the past saying, here you go, over to you. The use of AI has been able to pull out all of the information that's critical for an investigator the following morning, so that they're straight on with knowing what needs doing and how to do it, as opposed to I need to read through an entire case file to work that out. So we're looking at the less of the decision making, but more of the pulling information together. So we have lots of disclosure schemes. So we're looking at how do we pull the right information off our systems from a disclosure scheme point of view to put it in front of a decision maker to make a decision. So we're trying to take out some of the admin behind it and make it more efficient, because it can do it in seconds, whereas for policing it would take us probably best part of the day to do some of the disclosure work.
Thank you for that example. It really helps to kind of understand through a practical, tangible example. How's the organization adapting to AI?
I think organisation culturally, we differ between, you've got the youngsters in policing. I still like to think I'm one of them, but quite clearly not quite as young as I used to be. And those staff have grown up with AI, or they're growing up in a world where it's become very normal very quickly. And then you've got the other end of policing who were possibly not quite as up to date and finding it hard to grasp that AI can do some of this work. So there's a bit of a cultural tension, I think, within policing around those that trust AI and those that are more wary of it. And I think that's where the centre of the Police AI Centre have really got their work cut out. And that's what they're trying to bridge, is that gap around not just culturally, but how we show the trust is in AI and that we've done it right, as opposed to it's going to come back and you can't trust it and it'll have hallucinated and it'll tell you something you didn't need to know. And all of these horror stories in the press that we see keep happening. Whereas actually, when we do it right, we want the Police AI Centre wants to be able to show, you can have confidence in this. It's going to make your job more efficient. And it means we can spend more time on the streets doing what police do as humans.
And I guess when you talk about changing culture and changing behaviors, that takes some time. Are there particular challenges that you've come across or have faced? Are there parts that have kind of worked and absorbed this more easily versus others?
Yeah, I think our frontline absorb it much quicker. I think anything they can do that makes their life more efficient, they're happy to grasp with two hands. I think it's more tricky for maybe some of us as senior leaders, because actually we've seen the pitfalls of things that happen when they go wrong, and we're desperate to make sure that we give the public the best service we can give them. And yet they're wary of not being in control of AI and not being in quite as a position where we just feel like we can accept anything. Whereas I think as when you're young in the organization, you're happy to try anything. So I think we're built more on this could go wrong. We've got these risk elements to us. And when we don't understand, and I think understanding is the key part. We've done a lot of work in the centre with AI because of M and the digital toolkit. And I've learned things I never knew I would need to know about AI. But actually, it kind of shows I didn't know anything beforehand. I was just blindly accepting what was put in front of me. Then when you see all the pitfalls, you understand why people can be risk averse to that. But I think policing's got to find that happy medium where the centre of police AI can literally move this forward. So the efficiency, the effectiveness, because that's what the public need. They need more of us and they need more of our time and less of us spending time doing some of these jobs that we don't need to be doing.
Yeah, and I guess you mentioned the public there. Can you maybe give us some examples of how AI is impacting on the public?
So from a public perspective, AI has created all of these new crimes. So like I said earlier, deepfakes, the online harm, non-consensual intimate images, all of these things AI has brought them to the forefront. We've also got issues around fraud. We've got issues, AI can practically do anything now. So trying to work out whether you're looking at something that's true, that's not true, who's created it, where it's happened. And the public are faced with this every day. And yet we all understand burglary, theft, assault on the street. And yet when you use AI as part of stalking or you use AI within domestic abuse, it's not quite as cut and dry and it's not quite as clear about what's actually happening to you. So I think the public are in the same position of understanding all of these extra crime types that are now upon them that they can be subjected to. Whereas before, if you went home and shut your door, you'd hope you'd like to be safe aside from your domestic abuse side. Whereas now you've got a phone and a computer everywhere you go, and actually you're not safe from it. So I think us understanding AI helps because we're able to give advice to the public better. So that kind of crime prevention advice. But I also think us being able to help the public identify when crimes have happened. So understanding that these crimes, we used to have public order crimes where they can be public order crimes, but are generated by AI now. We can still deal with it. And we're the tools. So we talk about notification apps. So notification apps, we've got new legislation around that. And it's about making sure the public know we've got this new legislation, that we can actually deal with it. So even if they've got a concern, they should come to us and let us know.
the whole issue with the public and AI, I think, is really interesting because on the one hand, as you've said, AI enables members of the public to kind of commit crimes that may not have been possible previously, but
Mm.
equally, there are members of the public that need to be protected from those very crimes. Um, how do you strike that balance between building up trust and building up confidence in the public that so that they can actually address some of these crimes and some of these activities that are now going on?
I think it's really tricky, and I think some of it is time. Some of it is time and a bit drip fed. So we're using, for those, some people will have seen Bobby in action across Thames Valley Police. So Bobby is an AI generated chat agent, but can refer you into a police staff member so that you can actually talk to them and you can report your crime online. And it's had some fantastic results. And we're seeing that being adopted in different places and similar things being adopted. The public, when they're getting an answer quickly, I think have become accustomed to things like chatbots now. And I think you can't go anywhere, can you, without asking a chatbot all the questions first. So I think if we get it right, it can work really well. And I think when we are getting it right, that's the bits when we start pushing out and you'll start to see people starting to trust more. And I think because they're using it in other areas, it's less scary when it comes to the policing around that. And I think again, the younger generation don't have an issue with it, but actually we need to have a policing system that fits all of society. So we're not going to be able to just move to things like chatbots and AI generation. We are still going to need to have front counters. We're going to still need to have people on the beat. We still need to have the phone calls, people going around to talk to vulnerable people or elderly people who don't want to use that type of technology. So that's policing's one of our big challenges. Is we've got to address all of the public, and all of the public have very different needs. But I think being able to have some of these quick answers, we all want a question. If we're awake at 2 a.m. and we want a question answered, what better way to get it than AI? We see people using Chat GPT or Copilot. Being able to get that from a policing perspective, I think, is really important because you're getting the right information that's been managed by the police, as opposed to it's someone's opinion somewhere else. So I think that's really key. And I think that's where we need to show the trust of the public, but we need to be honest to the public and tell them what we're doing. So I think that's where the Police Centre of AI comes in, around being really clear on how we do it ethically, and how we manage that to make sure it is fit for policing. And that, like I say, it's not replacing decision makers. Policing still needs to make the decisions. It's not about AI taking over that position.
And when you look at the national center and the focus of violence against women and girls, I just wonder, how is AI being used to help police officers take those decisions at what is a very fraught time?
So that's where the toolkit comes in for us. And that's where as our AI agent, sits in the middle, and that's where she helps. What she's able to do is the issues like non-consensual intimate images, which is a real fraught point of someone's life, of ringing the police and needing help. We're able now to ask the questions around, what should I do? How do I take that investigative stance to make sure evidentially I can hold on to all of that information to get the best chance of a prosecution? Can now answer that at the touch of a button. So an officer can type in, someone's reported non-consensual intimate images, what do I do? And it will give them the full, here's two to refer them to, this is how we take down the images, because actually one of the key points is getting images taken off at that stance. So by able to put that in the hands of frontline officers, they're not in panic mode about a crime they've never seen before, because although they're becoming more and more frequent, what we still see is these are crimes that not every officer will have come across. They're not ones every officer was trained on 20 years ago, because they didn't exist. So now being able to put them through this toolkit in their hands and being able to give them this is the national approach we take. So we've partnered with Revenge Porn Helpline so that AI generated images we can record, we can look at seeing how they're being used across the country, but actually always with the victim focus in mind. So the toolkit is enabling us to do that and provide that to every force in the country, which is what we couldn't do before. And you reliant upon a letter that went out saying this is what we're doing, and did it get to where it needed to be? And probably not. And if it was printed off, it was, even if we'd updated it, the print off would sit on the parade room table for the next 10 years. So the toolkit enables us to be right in the heart of every police force with those questions, but really quick answers. The full guidance is still there, but can make that so much quicker and simpler at 3 o'clock in the morning.
And in terms of that particular example, just thinking about domestic violence in particular, how is helping or addressing domestic violence? Because if you look at the statistics, they're pretty horrendous.
Yeah, absolutely. And domestic abuse is a horrendous crime, and one that's massively underreported. So again, the context and the way we speak to people is really important, and helps with that. And also that ability to identify coercive control and behaviour, which is a real tricky one. And some people don't even know they've been subjected to it themselves. So can pick up all of those things by, non-consensual intimate images and spiking are all versions of coercive control within a domestic abuse relationship. So will point that out. So instead of officers just looking at it very simply as this is one crime, they're looking at it as pattern of behaviour, and can identify that pattern of behaviour and say, have you considered this might be coercive control? If you do, you might want to look at these things. You might want to look at the risk assessments we need to do to make sure we can keep these people safe. So it enables us to do all of those things without someone having to ask it, is this domestic abuse? It will answer in the first for it.
That's really interesting, and for such an important issue that affects society in all parts of the country as well. We've talked about some of the things that you all are doing and that the National Centre is doing in terms of AI. Claire, thinking forward, what are the plans looking ahead?
So looking ahead, we're working really closely with the Centre of Police AI, because actually what we need to do is deal with some of the issues. So domestic violence disclosure scheme is a really key one for us, and that links to also things like Sarah's law, so child sexual offending disclosures. So those two disclosure areas we want to expand, and we want to expand the timeframes. So we get these requests for disclosures, and there are a lot now, and that's great because that means people are aware that they can get these disclosures. But there's a huge amount of administration that goes on in the background to make sure we're disclosing the right information to the right people and safeguarding the people at the other side of it. So one of our biggest plans at the moment is to look at that, is to look at how do we make that a really streamlined approach, still keeping our decision makers, still keeping the safeguarding process, but taking away the bits that AI can do for us really nicely and really well, and to a national standard, so that you're not in a postcode lottery. So looking at those things, we're also looking at protective orders. So under the protective orders side, under the independent sentencing review, things have changed a little bit around people going to prison, and we're much more reliant on protective orders for the sentencing timeframes. So being able to pull together a protective orders file, which is already a culmination of the file that you've already done for your investigation, being able to pull all of that out and almost just put it in the way it's wanted for the protective orders. So we're looking at that as well, because that will save huge amounts of time for officers, but also get a really substantial and, again, a national approach to a protective orders file into the court system, and hopefully therefore getting protective orders to protect the public as well.
I mean, those are two fantastic examples, but for those who aren't involved kind of in policing and in the detail of police procedures, just explain in a little more detail the issue around disclosure. Why is that an issue, and therefore why is it important that we use AI to address that issue?
From a disclosure point of view, we record crime reports, intelligence, information that's come into our systems. It's usually over a couple of systems, and it can span 20, 30 years for some people. Some people that we have nothing on, some people we hold so much information on. And it's about being able to target the right information, because if someone has to read every bit of information that's been recorded for 30 years, the chances are they're going to miss something. Whereas with AI, we can make sure it's picking up the right information. It's telling us the right information that we can disclose to enable people to keep themselves safe and their children safe, because that's the aim of these two disclosure themes, is to be able to make the right decisions based on the information, so that I can tell you everything I know in a way that's going to make sense to the public, rather than here's a load of police written spiel which nobody understands. So we're putting it together in a package that actually then a human will check and make that decision if it's the right information, and also look if there's anything missing, so they can still scan over everything. But instead of reading 30 years worth of information about someone, they can have this summary put in front of them really quickly, which is really useful.
Thank you, and thank you for that explanation. I mean, when you talk about disclosure and disclosing information, I guess that the question that follows on almost naturally from there is, how is AI being governed in this policing context?
And that's where the Centre of AI come in, because they're doing the governance of it. They make sure that we are doing it in a very strict and ethical way to make sure that we are getting the right results. So it's very heavily tested, academically reviewed. But that is definitely, for me, over to the AI Centre. So we work closely with them so that they can put the safeguards in place, because actually that's what we want. We want the trust and confidence from the public. that's why it's not as quick for policing. It's not as quick for us just to say this tool's come out, we can start using it, because we need to make sure it's not giving us the wrong results, and we need to make sure it's tested within an inch of its ability to make sure that we're always getting the right thing and we're not going to do it wrong or be caught out by it. So whilst we all want to trust AI, we also need to trust AI with some guidance behind it to say we've tested it and we are comfortable it meets all of the thresholds that the Centre of AI have put in place.
And can you give us a little bit of detail around what those governance rules are and how that governance works?
I can't really, if I'm honest with you. That would be much more for the Centre of AI, and I will get it wrong if I try and tell you what we have a huge kind of national governance system. So we have a national tech board, which is all about assurance, and there's a national assurance process for AI as well. So you have to go through, which we talk about the tools, where the tools are based, the hallucinations from it, the kind of the security of it, whether it's in transit or in rest. So it's a huge document that we fill in, and it's an ongoing document and an ongoing process. It never ends. So it's never we've assured that, thanks very much, move on. It's a continual process to make sure that as things develop and as things change, we don't miss something. A whole new world for me is 23 years in policing who didn't have to do this 20 years ago.
Well, you know what this means, Claire? It just means that offline, I'm going to ask you for a name, because it sounds like I need someone to come in on the podcast to cover off that governance area.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And again, you mentioned trust and maintaining and the public's trust, and I think that's absolutely critical. How are you going about kind of engaging with the public? How are you bringing about that trust? Because trust is not, in my opinion, a bit like a light switch. You can't just switch it on and hope it's there. It takes time to build. Just wondered how you're going about that.
So a few ways. We're engaged with the tech companies as well, because actually I think one of the things around how do policing use AI is about engaging with the tech companies and people like Ofcom to say, actually, what are you doing about it as well to govern it, to make sure that we can work with it and work alongside what are the boundaries that should be in place already and where we're seeing those lack of boundaries. So our work with the tech companies enables us to look at victim focus groups, but also focus groups internally for them around how would this work? How can we do this better? From a policing point of view, we run a number of victim voice groups to look at if this was you or where you are or in the crime type that you had happen, how would you feel about that? So with the view that that does build the trust and confidence, and it is built based on victim and survivor voices rather than us just saying, we think this is what needs to happen with an AI and that looks really good, so let's do that. This is about what people need and when they need it. So we are slower sometimes than we would like to be, because actually these points are all really key for making sure we do them as part of the process to developing AI, and actually also being able to go out and say, this is what we've done, come and criticize us, come and tell us whether it's right or it's wrong, because actually we need that feedback to be able to move to the next step. So we're engaged with lots of stakeholders across the sectors, both within kind of rape, domestic abuse, women's aid, all those women's groups as well, and alongside public protection, looking at social services and our multi-agency safeguarding hub. So to provide us with all that information. So there's a lot of people that are involved in any journey around any AI tool that we've got going.
That's incredible. Claire, thank you for joining me on the AI Adoption podcast. We've covered a huge amount of ground, and I have to say, I didn't know very much about the NCVPP till we met, and I wanted you on this podcast to let everyone else know some of the good work that you and your colleagues are doing, particularly in how AI is being used. And I think you've given us some excellent examples of where AI is touching people's lives at a time that is when those people are very often most vulnerable, particularly when you're talking about domestic abuse, you're talking about violence against women and girls, you're talking about public safety. This is where we need to bring AI in, and dare I say it, ensure that AI is being used in an ethical and trustworthy way to protect the public. And I felt it was really important that your voice was heard on the podcast. So thank you so much, Claire, for joining me on the AI Adoption podcast.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for being here. It's been fantastic to talk to you, and always happy to welcome anybody in to give us any support on the AI side, because we are very much learning, certainly from the NCVPP. So always happy to have the support as well.